Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all in this bright morning to Reverie Language Technologies and NASSCOM's Center of Excellence for Data Science and AI for our third NLP Masterclass in Indic Language Computing under the AI Pathshala banner, which is backed by the Government of Karnataka and Startup Karnataka. In this very special third masterclass, your coaches of the day would be Bhupen Chauhan, who will be talking about the real life use cases for transliteration in Indic language computing. And of course, followed by a 10-minute quiz. You need all the Amazon gift vouchers, right? At the end of the fifth session. Thereafter, we would have Vikrant Sharma to talk about neural machine translation, which is the need of the hour, given all the AI forays in Indian languages. On that note, I would like to invite Bhupen Chauhan for his masterclass. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Swati. Let me just share my screen and we can get started from there. Yeah. Can Swati give me a thumbs up if you're able to see my screen? Awesome. Good morning, everyone. So, as Swati mentioned, we will be talking today about transliteration and phonetic typing. Before that, just a brief recap of what we have seen till now in the first two master classes. The first one is history of Indic computing and its core pillars. We learned about encoding, fonts, input, and editing methods. We did an introduction to ISCI, ASCII, the Unicode standards. Then we also learned about nomenclature for fonts, script grammar, script validation, editing rules across platforms, formats, OpenType, and legacy formats. Then in the last session, we talked about the typing challenges using Indic keyboard and impact of wrong typing, designing keyboard layout in Indian context. In today's session, and the first one that is, we will be covering the need for phonetic typing and past efforts. What are the nuances for transliteration for Indian scripts and challenges and how it can be solved. To start with it, I want to tell you a story. And this is something that happened between the British officer wanted to teach some common English phrases and things like that. So he asked his clerk to teach his peon this. The clerk tried and tried but failed. Eventually, the clerk thought of an idea. He went back to his British officer and taught him phrases in English that sounded like day. And there was a bunch. These are examples of such usage in that time. The middle image is of Siraj-ud-Daulah, was the last Nawab of Bengal, and he was commonly also referred to as Sir Roger Dowler. This image is of Allahabad, and because the Britishers could not pronounce it, they used to call it as Isle of Bart. With this, I would like to introduce to you transliteration and phonetic typing of why is it important. We come across transliteration in our everyday usage in our walks of life. So we see it in our railway stations where name of the city is transliterated to different languages and scripts. We see it in our highways. We see it in our voter ID cards. And we also see it in the ancient Sanskrit scripts, which are on the internet, but which conversion of properties. What we'll be covering today will be Indian English to Indian script conversion. So these will be the scenarios that with Indian scripts to English. Right. So the challenge in the number of letters available in individual languages. As you can see, there are so many representations or letters available to represent the sound. When you compare it with English, which has only 26 letters, the properties are not easily representable. Now, this challenge has been tried to solve for a long time. And to show you the past efforts, the initial effort of being able to represent Devanagari or text written in Indian languages in English started way back in 1872, where Hunterian transliteration was a form that came into picture. So it is still widely accepted as a national system of romanization in India. It was developed in the late 19th century, and it has both diacritic and non-diacritic avatars. Later on, in 1894, interest to study the Sanskrit language that could represent Indian languages without any loss of phoneme or the phonetic sounds. This system used diacritics to cover the alphabet. In 1983, a Dutch scholar, while creating a software package for LaTeX for typesetting Devanagari, in 1990, Harvard Kyoto system was introduced. It did not use diacritics or special characters, and it was built with in mind to input text within the minimum motion of fingers. 1994, the introduction of iTrans. This was spearheaded by Avinash Chopde, and this was done as a passionate group, which was RMIM, to share trivia about songs, lyrics across on the internet. And this is a very common one, and most people use this to represent Indian languages and being able to share it between two computers. It used diacritical signs found on the common English computer keyboard. So you did not have to get special keyboard layouts in being able to represent this scheme of writing. Right. Here I'm showing you the different schemes of transliteration compared with how the letters in Devanagari are shown. So as you can see in the Hunterian, in IAST, in iTrans, there are some diacritics that are used. Here you can see, if you notice, the y sound is represented differently in all the different systems that were developed. One of the challenges that one faces when trying to work with Indian languages, especially the ones which are in the northern side of India, like Assamese, Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Kashmiri, Punjabi, and Gujarati, there is this property of schwa sound. Now, schwa is the pronunciation that is implicit in many scripts. It is pronounced in some cases, while in some cases it is not. Now, this causes confusion for non-native speakers and linguists when creating rules that define such cases. Now, let's look at some examples. Here, lapat, and when you compare it with lapte. Now, in the first example, and also the second one, samaj and samjha. Now, in the first example of both the cases, the final schwa is deleted. You can see after ta, there is no inherent sound. And here also after samaj, the jha, there is no inherent shwa sound. Now, in the second case of both these examples, lapte and samjha, the inherent pronunciation is missing from the middle of the word. Similarly, there are examples like English, where the inherent shwa sound is not present anymore after g. In Devanagari, again, after va and ga, the pronunciation is omitted. In Vimla, Sulochana, after ma and cha, the inherent sound is omitted. Now, this caused confusion for non-native speakers as well as systems who want to accurately represent the text written in Devanagari or any script which has this property in English will face challenges where how does one know whether to introduce an or to not introduce an a? This is a problem that is still open and there has been no real solution to this. So anyone who is interested in trying to do more research on this can definitely reach out to us and we can work together. Right. Then when trying to convert Indian scripts to English, there is also this challenge of out of vocabulary words. Now, converting of vocabulary words written in Indian scripts, which are not part of the native set, cause challenges. Here I've taken an example of somebody wanting to say Terera Swiggy, which is open Swiggy. The word Swiggy, when we want to convert it to the English script, we want to the spelling of that word to be SWIGGY, not SVIGGI as it intuitively feels. Similarly, in example such as Johnny ko call karo, now you and I. Now, these out of vocabulary words, when we try to represent in Latin scripts, which is non-native, which is not native to these languages, cause challenges of these. Right. Now, trying to convert Indian to Indian scripts. Indian to Indian script conversion is relatively easy. The conversions are easier. Now, since all Indian scripts are phonetic in nature, conversion from one script to another is relatively easy. And like I said, here I have shown an example. All the are fairly common. You will see ba, a matra, and all of the characters that are required to represent this sound of the word is available in most of the languages. Converting from in one Indian script to another, there are some cases where one might face challenges. Now, some Indian script have provisions for short pronunciations of O and E matras. These, when converted to scripts that do not support, create output that do not retain this property. Whereas in some scripts, converting the matra as it is causes incorrect pronunciations. So in this example, the first one, this is the name Kodali. Now, in Telugu and in Kannada and other southern languages, there is this provision of short O matra, whereas this short O matra is not present in Devanagari. Now, if you convert this Kodali to Devanagari, the property of this short O matra is now lost when we are converting to this one. And converting from Devanagari back to Kannada, Telugu, or any such language which has this property of short O, you will lose the inherent short O, and the representation will be of long O matra. There is another case where if you see the word Chennai, now Chennai to represent in southern languages, the accurate way of writing Chennai is to use the I matra. But using the I matra in Devanagari or Hindi, the pronunciation does not sound right. The case is similar with Lucknow, where in Hindi and in Marathi and the scripts that use Devanagari, we represent la, kha, na, and u. Whereas if you want to represent that in Kannada, it becomes Lucknow. So these are some challenges that anybody who is trying to develop a transliteration system for Indian languages should keep in mind. Right. There is also this problem of lack of representations. Now, some Indian scripts lack representation for some sounds which are not native to that language. In such scenarios, conversions become lossy. Let's take this example of V. Devanagari has this V letter to produce this sound, whereas in Bengali, that there is no such letter that you can use to represent this sound. In Odia also it's not there, but because it is this letter of B with a dot in middle is something that is never used in the written script, but it is mentioned in Unicode. But nobody uses this one, so the problem still remains. There is this curious case of Tamil next, where if you see, Tamil does not have a lot of these work letters available. So in Devanagari, if you want to write ka and ga, you have those letters to represent that sound. But in Tamil, these both are represented by this one letter, ka. Similar, the case is same with ba and pa, and this is represented by one letter. So the script becomes limiting, and though the script is phonetic, but conversion becomes lossy since the pronunciation itself is contextual in case of Tamil. English to Indian scripts. Now, to create systems that are able to convert from English to Indian scripts, there are different ways to do it. One is you can define mapping which with the use of combination rules, this can be verified by the vocabulary present to generate the final output. What are mappings? Mappings are building blocks of a rule-based system, like we saw. Now, carefully designed mappings can make the translation system efficient and give high-quality results. This is just a representation of what a mapping should look like. Individual words are then mapped to the pronunciations that are available for that letter. Combination rules. Now, these are rules that encode the properties of the language into the code. Here, the developer can handle nuances of the language. For example, here what is represented, and this has been also covered in the previous discussions that we've had. Remain on its own. It can be followed by a nukta, anuswar, and avagraha. These rules, combined with the mappings that we saw, can generate candidates. And once these candidates are created, we can then finally use it to check the vocabulary of the target language that we're trying to create the transliteration in. Now, vocabulary acts as a source of truth for the rule-based transliteration system. The candidates generated by the mappings and combination rules get validated from the defined vocabulary. Let's take an example to make this more clear. Let's take the example of the word Pathshala. Now, Pathshala can be broken down into these smaller units, and each of these units can have a mapping. For example, Per has the mapping Per. Shirk has the different ways in which Shirk can be represented. Shir and the Shir. Now, combined with the combination rules, the different variations that come up are Patshala, Pathshala, Patshala, 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 and Patshala. Now, with out of these different candidates, the one to be chosen is something that the vocabulary helps in deciding. The vocabulary has the correct word, Pathshala. And of these candidates, pros and cons. If you are to develop a rule-based systems, what are the pros and cons that you would be looking to? The pros are it's a lightweight engine. It can be optimized for compute, so you can store a smaller dictionary or smaller vocabulary to cater to one particular use case, and can develop rule-based engines around it. it can be designed for a specific domain. It can be worked around to use very limited memory footprints. And this is one engine that we've developed can be implemented in feature phones. What are the cons? In a rule-based system, you need manual rule creation, and addition of new language takes time because a developer has to then work with a linguist and being able to understand the different mappings and rules that can be implemented. After rule-based system, with the advent of machine learning, you can use machine learning to using the many-to-many architecture of neural networks or translation systems can be trained. Now, what is required to be able to create this machine learning system? You need parallel data. It requires a large amount of parallel data to train accurate transliteration models. Now, once you have this data, you can then use it to train a model. Here, I'm representing what a network would look like. Taking the same example, Pathshala, it is tokenized to PA, TH, SHA, and LA. Now, after tokenizing, the input goes to be created as with an embedding and passes through the encoder. After the encoder, it gets decoded and Pathshala output is generated. This is a typical sequence to sequence model that one can train to create transliteration system. The pros are the rule creation in a machine learning data is available. It can be designed for a specific domain as well. Now, what are the cons? It is resource intensive. It is slower compared to the deterministic rule-based engines. So the response times that you will get when you are creating a translation system is much more faster in the rule-based engine. But if you are developing a neural network-based, the response times are much slower. Right. Now let's when we are created a translation system. Names. Names is one of in the railways. The names of passengers are converted into Devanagari. This was one of the first use case for machine-generated transliterations. It was developed in the early 90s, and the system was rule-based, and the algorithms that were written could generate the rules automatically. Names as a use case, right? Now, if one wants to read this name is Venkata Narasimha Rajuveripetta. Now, the problem of compound words is pretty common in Indian people names and places names. This particular is a place name of Andhra Pradesh. This particular name is name of a station in the border of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. If you can see here, this name is actually a compound word of 5 different words. This is one major challenge when we are trying to solve for Indian translation systems for names. Media. Now, songs, movie names, albums, artist names are ideal candidates for machine transliteration. Here, I have taken an example screenshots from applications that are currently available on the market, which is tried to localize an Indian language. If you see here, the song name Let Me Love You becomes Let Me Love You. So these are some challenges that one would face when they would want to create a transliteration system. Born to Shine becomes Born to Shine. Bad Boy becomes Bad Boy. And this is very interesting where GOAT, the name of the album, has been converted where O and A are now matras and not vowels in itself. Now let's read this sentence. उसे बताओ कैसे phone use करते हैं. For a for us, when we read this, we are able to convert the first word and second word into its respective languages, where we are able to say, okay, the first word in this sentence is in Hindi, while the second representation USE is in English. This is the challenge of contextual disambiguation. In the same sentence or in different scenarios, the same word representation is used for different scripts and different languages. This is something that here at Reverie we have been able to solve, and our engines are able to understand this nuance that is available. Addresses. Now, with the surge of home and last mile deliveries in India, the converting addresses to local language is a big use case. We also see conversion of addresses like in the railway stations and in the highways and in every milestone that we cross when on our journeys. Converting addresses, I want to pick one example. This is an image of Ahmedabad. Now, if one is able to read what is written in the Gujarati script, it is pronounced as Ahmedabad. If you read what is written in Devanagari or in the Hindi, it is Ahmedabad. And what is written in English is pronounced as Ahmedabad. So the same location, the same station, in the same signboard, different speakers of different languages will read this board differently and sound it differently as well. This is one challenge when you try to convert addresses into Indian languages from English, where if you were to convert what is written in English directly, it would sound as Ahmedabad, but what it actually should be in Hindi is Ahmedabad, and in Gujarati, Ahmedabad. This is one more interesting example of a street name or an address. So this is a fictional address, it is not really real, but this is to show the challenge that is available, that is present. St. John's Hospital, First Cross Street, Chennai, India. What you see here is the first ST is to be pronounced as Saint. The second is to be pronounced as first because it is preceded by a number. And the final one as a street because that is what the user wants to intend to. This problem is also one of the disambiguation like we saw in the media example, but such examples are available in plenty. Now, we at Reverie have been able to solve this using the same disambiguation routine, and that is how we take care of addresses. The last and final example is of typing. Now, phonetic typing is the use case that is most common for transliteration, and implementing one properly is something that one should do. Here I've taken an example of a commonly used transliteration typing tool where the properties like we saw of representing vowels is not implemented, and if you were to type the word Kiswa, the tool is showing invalid words which should not. Now this brings to the end of the presentation, and thank you all for attending, and we can take some questions now.
Thank you, Bhupen. It's so interesting when you said that Allahabad became Isle of Bat, and Ahmedabad, Ahmedabad, Ahmedabad. Transliteration plays such an important role in all the aspects. And when you spoke about contextual transliteration, like for example, John Players could mean John Khiladi, or it could mean John Players the shirt brand. Could you elaborate more on the context part of transliteration, and also how it's basically a vertical and an industry agnostic feature for Indic language computing?
Right. So the contextual transliteration is important. The example that you took, John Players, and becoming John should be represented as John Players and not John Khiladi, is one that many e-commerce players, if they want to convert and represent their website in Indian language, would face. What I also talked about was the disambiguation part and how the context of the word in which it is used is important for it to be converted accurately. With the example, उसे बताओ कि phone use कैसे करते हैं. Or if you take the example of Singh Sahab the Great, then the THE written in Singh Sahab the Great is to be pronounced as the. But the same आप कहाँ थे, then THE written in आप कहाँ थे is to be pronounced as th में एक ही मात्रा थी. So contextual transliteration is important when we are trying to solve real world use cases.
And I think Ashish had raised his hand. Ashish, would you want to put your question on the Q&A panel? And also Bhupen Rashmi R, she's asking that if there is any transliteration API that is available.
Yes, we have a transliteration API that is available, that is ready to use. So Drew, drop in a mail to us and we'll be able to help you with an API.
Any more questions? Please put your questions in the Q&A panel. Okay, Bhupen, can you share the first 3 slides of your presentation? Ashish would want to, just basically have a review of the first 3 slides. Yeah, because he missed the beginning of the session. So first 3 slides, if you can take him through, that will be great. Sure. Ashish is doing it for you right now.
Sure, Ashish. So in the first 3 slides, we just took a recap of what we have done in the previous sessions and what we are going to cover in this session. In the second slide, this was an example that Swati talked about, where Allahabad was commonly referred to as Isle of Bart, because Britishers could not get their tongues around the names of the local places. They ended up transliterating them into approximate anglicized equivalents. The practice grew to become something of an informal standard and an amusing habit. So Sirajud-Daulah was given the name Sir Rauja Dollar, and Allahabad was Allahabad. In fact, Karachi was not so lucky, as it was apparently called Karachi. So, and then we talked about, then I introduced what phonetic typing and transliteration is and how we come across transliteration in our everyday use.
Also, Bhupen, we have another question from Mahesh Kumar. He's asking us, how can we tackle this problem of different ways of representation, especially in case of proper nouns?
How can we tackle this problem of different ways of representation?
Right.
Mahesh, when you're asking this question, are you asking in different languages, or in the same language you can represent that word in different ways?
I think, Bhupen, it will be helpful for him if he can answer both the scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So by taking the first one, if you want to represent in different languages, that's the exact problem that transliteration tries to solve. When a name, for example, let's take your own name, Mahesh. So if you want to convert it to Hindi, the transliteration routine would be able to convert it to Hindi. When you want to convert to Odia, it would be able to do the same. So the first uh, problem, if you are asking that, is inherent to the problem of transliteration itself. But if the question is around how, if there are different ways of representing that name in the same language, that is an area of challenge that is still present. For example, Mahesh, if you are a Telugu or a Kannada speaker, then there are two ways of writing the A matra in Mahesh. You can use the short A and you can use the long A. I can also go to the slide to show what I mean here. Right. So, here in Codally, let's take that example of Codali. You can use the short A, which has been used here. You can also use the long A. Now, this comes to how the language and people are using that language is used to speaking it. If they stretch the words codally, then it should be using the long O format. But yeah, this is very subjective, and it is for the language to be able to understand it and properly implement it.
Any more questions? You may want to raise your hands or put your questions in the Q&A panel. Else, you can email your questions as well. I shall put the email ID in the chat panel. All right, so it's time to wear your thinking caps, and we would start our in between session. Oh, there's another question here. 1 minute. I think so. Okay, so so it's time for our bit in session, quiz, a short 10-question quiz, which we will start now, and you would have exactly 10 minutes to sound off the quiz. Robin, may I please request you to put the quiz questions? Thank you, Robin. And your time starts now. I would request everyone to participate in the quiz, as Amazon gift vouchers await the first 3 winners at the end of a finale 5th session. Last 5 minutes to go. Another 2 minutes. Thank you everyone for taking the quiz. Okay, with that note, we invite Vikrant Sharma to take his session on neural machine translation in Indic languages. Text to speech sounds like 2050, right? But no, it's happening now in 2021 with all the progress that AI has made in Indian languages. AI for Bharat. Vikrant, I welcome you aboard now.
Hi Swati, thank you. And good morning everyone. Thanks to all the attendees for taking the time to be here. So I will now take us through neural machine translation, a brief overview. Yes, so good morning everyone. So we'll be looking at neural machine translation. So not just the technology, but how to craft an end-to-end solution using the technologies available and what other tasks that we have to concentrate on regarding the challenges that we face. So I'll be turning off my video in the interest of bandwidth saving. So is my screen visible? Swati, can you please confirm?
Yes, Vikrant, we can see your screen, but if you can put that in presentation mode, that will be great, so that we can see the big screen.
Yes.
I think we are full screen now.
Yeah, we are full screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So before we begin, I would like you all to take a moment and just think about how should we translate this simple sentence, that this is not a long sentence, which of course it isn't. So now the obvious, sorry, Swati.
Vikrant, Robin, can you unmute the participants, and if somebody would want to answer that, they can raise their hands and answer that question, Vikrant's question.
Okay, just
Any of the participants who would want to answer Vikrant's question, that how would we translate this simple sentence, this is not a long sentence?
yeah. So Swati, can you confirm the participant name?
Yeah, once let them raise their hands.
Sure, I'll.
Anybody from our NLP enthusiasts who would want to answer that question?
Okay. So I think we can move ahead and.
Yes, Vikrant, I think we can. Thank you, Vikrant.
Yeah, so the most obvious thing that runs in our minds is, yeah, ek lamba vakya nahi hai. So which is the simplest and most common way to think about it. But the not so obvious translation, that sentence can also in other domains and other contexts mean a punishment. And because of the presence of the word long, it is even more likely because it can specify durations, which is more related to the punishment sense. So this is what translation is. Now let's say we have another task of translating.
So Vikrant,
yeah.
So we have an alternate to your question. So Iram
Yes.
says that this is a short sentence.
Yes.
That's how he perceived it.
Okay.
Iram, are you comfortable in talking in Hindi? Would you want to attempt that in Hindi as well? Then we can unmute you and you can, okay, yes, all right. Robin, can you unmute Iram, please, so that he can say it in Hindi as well?
Yeah.
Yes, Iram, can you speak now?
Yes, ma'am.
Sure, Iram.
So, मैम इसको ट्रांसलेट करना है या इसको दूसरे तरीके से बोलना है मतलब?
Vikrant, how would you want Iram to address this? Iram ne option diya hai. He's saying this is a short sentence as an alternate to this is not a long sentence. So, Vikrant,
Yeah.
how would you want Iram to answer that?
So, but this is a short sentence would still be in the same language, right? So, yeah, of course, there is this missing piece that translate to which language that was not specified. So there are missing pieces there. But overall, we are looking at translating from one language to another.
So, Iram,
So-
Hindi में इसको कैसे बोलेंगे फिर?
Yes, it could also be said that यह एक छोटा वाक्य है. So, but that is not carrying the lexicality of not being present here. So
मतलब
semantically,
exact हम लोग
not a
को
long
उसका
thing is a
translation
short thing.
Sorry, Iram, what are you saying? Can you repeat?
एग्जैक्ट उसका ट्रांसलेशन चाहिए.
जी, मतलब as close as possible is where we want to be, since we will then go on to how a machine would learn. So if pieces are missing, so that would create confusion for the machine learning system down the line.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Iram.
Thank you for
Vikrant.
thanks. Okay. So now let us say that we are faced with this task of translating 30 lakh or around 3 million lines. So naturally, this raises a few problems of effort and time. So, which is why machine translation steps in. So what is machine translation? It is just software that allows the computer to translate text or speech. But in this session, we'll be limiting ourselves to the text part of it, from one language to another. So this is not to be confused with computer-aided translation, which is in itself a wide range of different kinds of tools that human translators use to perform their translation tasks. So machine translation is completely unassisted by any human intervention at runtime, which is why it can run faster and do it automatically. So since time immemorial, machines have been used precisely for this task, things that can be automated and made fast with as less in human intervention as possible. So machine translation can either be used as a standalone software, or it can be plugged into a CAT tool, a computer-aided translation, where it helps human translators to make their jobs faster. So an example of a CAT tool would be our own in-house Prabandhak and others like MateCat and SmartCat. So there are some considerations that we need to have while using machine translation. That even though if we get speed, the benefits of speed and reduced latency, almost instant translations, but what is the cost when it is incorrect? For example, in fields of healthcare or legal, while crafting judgments and translating judgments, so their accuracy is of utmost importance. That is why it can never leave without a human layer of verification. So this benefit of speed versus the cost of incorrect translation, this always has to be considered while evaluating the fitment of machine translation as a use case. So the simple example of hello, how are you? The machine then produces a translation in the desired target language. So moving on to the evolution of MT systems, how it has progressed over the years. So initially, we started with a rule-based machine translation system where people maintain dictionaries across languages. And so this was a very involved process, which required, as Bhupen earlier mentioned, in rule-based systems, that developers need to work in tandem with linguists in order to understand and write down those rules and make sure that they can be codified. Some rules may not even be since language in itself is an outgrowth of culture. So it grows with the people that use it. So there are no rules that can completely define a language, since it mostly usage based. So these systems were fast, but needless to say, they were not accurate enough for the purposes. Then people started training on example based systems, where they would maintain parallel sentences in the two languages, and the system would try to find parts and try to join them, take pieces from one sentence, take pieces from another sentence, and join them. But it would never be able to say anything that it had never seen. Then we can come to statistical machine translation, where first we see the use of statistics and probabilities. So it is not a defined and deterministic science anymore. It now is in the realm of probabilities. So again, we train the system on data, and the system builds a sequence of probabilities. How likely is a phrase to occur, given that this is the phrase that we want to translate, which then led to neural machine translation, which uses neural networks to achieve the task of translation. So in neural machine translation, so first the source sentence is converted to a sequence of tokens. So these numbers that we see here, these are indexes into a vocabulary of the source system. For example, hello is word number 34 in our vocabulary. Comma is token number 2. So each token is accounted for here in some fixed vocabulary. This then passes through an encoder. So what the encoder tries to do is it creates a hidden representation, a numerical representation, which is supposed to capture all the possible information of this sentence. Then this is passed on to the decoder, which then tries to look at this and produce a sequence of tokens in the target language, which is a different vocabulary specific to which language we are translating into. So this system is trained over a large amount of parallel corpus. So what is a parallel corpus? It is an aligned set of sentence pair, where each target sentence has a corresponding translation. And there is a large set of these, which is repeatedly passed over this machine, and it tries to adjust its weights accordingly so that it gets closer to what it sees as the output. So it is also helpful to think of it as a transformation. So this entire neural network can be looked at as a function which transforms this set into this set by matrix multiplications. There is nothing else going on here except matrix multiplication. So how we learn the contents of these matrices is defined by the data that it sees. And speaking of the data, so which is the only large input that we have for this model. So it is of utmost importance to make sure that the data actually helps the machine in learning. So this is the overall pipeline of how we train an NMT model, so that we start from a parallel corpus and end up with users. So the most important part, pre-processing, how we make it fit for a machine to be able to learn from it. And then we subject it to training over a period of, let's say, days or weeks. And once we have a trained model, then we deploy it and make it available for users to use. So we'll be looking at some of those steps in more detail as we move forward. So pre-processing. So why do we need this pre-processing step? Why can't data directly be fed into a machine learning algorithm? So first of all, the most important thing to note is Indic language NMT is inherently a low resource scenario as compared to, let's say, European languages. For example, there is plenty of data available for conversion between English to French and Spanish, Russian. There are hundreds of millions of parallel sentences available in the public domain. So which makes it relatively easier to train for those languages and harder for Indic languages where resources are only growing now. So we must make most of whatever data we have at hand. And since we are in the business of applying ML to use cases, we need reliable and consistent steps so that we can automate the whole process. Because the more manual touch points we have, so the more scope of error increases as time goes on. And we also want to make the learning as straightforward as possible for the machine. So since we looked at this is a transformation of one sequence to another, so it makes sense, as Iram had mentioned, if the source sentence has a not, but the target cannot account for it, then the model is confused, like what to do with this word now. So there is a conundrum that the model has to face then. So it helps when everything is as close to the source as possible in terms of representing. So what are our objectives in the pre-processing stage? So we want to convert all possible data to one single desired format. And we want to filter out noisy and erroneous data. So the more errors that we can take out from the input data, the better chance our model has of performing great. And we want to normalize different forms to a single form. And if possible, we want to increase the dataset size by artificially changing it or augmenting it. So conversion process. So this is often an overlooked part of any machine learning system, that how do we get the data and from where? And so it is important to have conversion scripts for various kinds of sources, so that again, this does not become a manual process. So the manual process would have been used to create those sources, but once they are in some kind of computer storage form, it should be relatively straightforward to convert it to your needs. So there can be different sources like databases, Excel files, translation memories that CAT tools use. So they are typically in XML. And it is handy to have tools ready to convert them. We can also look at PDF files, web scraping from, let's say a site is available in multiple languages. Then we can scrape that information and extract it for our users. So moving on, once we have the data converted to our desired form, so we must understand that if we have more data, it does not necessarily mean that our model would be better. Because since we have experimentally found out that, if your data set has a lot of noise, so adding more data would not help, but removing that noisy data helps far more. So we can just, for the sake of simply doing it automatically, so where you don't even have to check sentences, so you can remove empty source or targets. Or let's say you have a sentence pair where the source is incredibly long and the target is very short. That can clearly tell you that it is misaligned, it is noisy. So all such sentences can be removed, where let's say the source and target are the same thing. So that does not help translation, because it is supposed to convert and now it sees the target is the same. And let's say if we are translating between English to Hindi, and the target language does not have, let's say, 50 to 60% of Devanagari characters. So these can be automatically found out, and it is a very common source of errors. So once we have filtered and removed such noise from our data, we can move on to normalizing them. So as covered in the earlier sessions of the Pathshala, so normalization can be of various forms, where there are some illegal sequences which exist in the wild data we find on the web, but which may not be correct sequences. But these can be automatically fixed. So in cases where an automatic fix is not available, we would then omit those sequences rather than risk the model not being able to learn. So we can also normalize different types of nasals to a single form, let's say a bindi in this case, na and ma, so that the model sees lesser variations. So we are only trying to lessen the burden of learning different forms. We can also stick to one kind of spelling in terms of English spellings, American versus British. So here we are converting from American to a British spelling, but it could also have been the reverse. The important thing is to pick one and stick with it. Also, various kinds of punctuations and other symbols that do not necessarily add to the translation, the meaning of a translation, and are just there for noise or, let's say, decorative purposes. So these can also be normalized to a single form or even removed. So once we have normalized data and tried to bring variance down to a minimum, so we can start to look at augmenting it. So this is an optional part. We may not do it, but it helps when it is possible, that some simple augmentations, like if we have a lot of short sentences, we can just join them together with punctuations, conjunctions. So conjunctions won't change meaning. So you can join, like, he is a good boy, he is a good girl, she is a good girl. So we can join those two sentences with any kind of conjunction, and, but, therefore, or, because, and we can just increase data like that. So how does that help is that now the model is seeing the words in different positions in the sentence, in the beginning, at the end, mixed with other sentences. So that helps the model to see different patterns. Then we can mask, for example, numbers, URLs, email addresses. So these have no translation per se. These can be retained as is in the source and target part. So what we can do is we can mask these, replace them with placeholders, so that the model does not have to worry about them. They all can be replaced with, let's say, $1, $2, something like that. So the model just has to learn the semantic parts of it and can leave, let's say, proper nouns entities alone. Then we can remove all punctuation and duplicate the sentence pair, like one sentence with all the punctuation present, and we can duplicate it without any punctuation. So that increases, that straight away doubles our dataset size. And we can also introduce some noise. For example, we can remove some characters to simulate the fact that at runtime it will be getting noisy sentences to translate. So this is now controlled. So this is different from noise existing in the, that we removed in the filtering part. So this is now controlled. So you can add, let's say, 5% of noise in your overall data set, and then check the behavior of your model. So now that pre-processing is done and our data is ready, so we need to convert it so that the model can accept it in the sequence of tokens. So there are a few choices here. So each token that the model sees can be a word, it can be a subword, or it can be an individual character. So let's look at this example here. For example, the word Milfordshire can be just kept as single word in our vocabulary, or it can be broken into a number of different pieces, or it can be just fed as a single character. So the trade-off here is that once you have just word-based models, so your vocabulary grows to be infinite. So there are words, there are open classes, nouns, verbs. So these don't have a limit to the number of words present. So your system will forever be struggling to capture new words, and it will have unknown words for words it has never seen before. The next part is subword tokenization. So here what we do is we specify that, okay, let's say we want 20,000 to be our vocabulary. So then what the tokenization algorithm does is it tries to look for the most common 20,000 pieces from which it can construct anything. So it starts with characters, then builds up to 2 character words, then 3 character pieces, 4 character pieces, and then it till it reaches your desired size, till, let's say, 20,000 tokens have been reached. So now what is possible is any new word can be broken down into those pieces. The next is character based. So this is extremely small vocabulary, let's say 26 characters here. or 50 to 60 in the case of Indic languages. But that's it. But the difficult part for character-based machine translation is you lose context for like the word, since each character. So the model now has to piece together those characters and then also figure out that, okay, this makes a word first. Then we will look at how these words behave together. So it just increases exponentially the task of the model. Then we look at the architecture. Once we have our tokens ready, like which models do we want to pass it through? There are a few different choices here. Recurrent neural networks. So the state of the art currently is the transformer architecture as published by Google. So the sequence to sequence model based on transformer architecture, how it is different from the recurrent networks is that it allows a sequence to be converted in parallel and not dependent on output from the earlier stages. So what this does is it makes it highly parallelizable. So since all of the components of the input can be directly converted to the output and passed to the decoder, so the decoder has the entire input context available at all times. So it just does not only rely on the last stage, it can have the entire context present during the time of decoding, which can help it resolve long range dependencies. For example, in longer sentences where the first word determines what the last word will be inflected as. So that dependency can be carried along easily with transformer architecture. It helps more than the RNN. It is not completely solved, but it helps in that case. Also, it has been shown experimentally to be much more generalizable to unseen sentences, and it has a better performance overall. The other hyperparameter that we would want to look at is the learning rate. So this can greatly change the results that we see. So what the learning rate does is, as and when the model is consuming each batch, so when it sees that, okay, we have seen some error in the expected translation and the generated translation, so we want to make changes to the model. So how big changes are we making? That is determined by the learning rate. So if we make very large changes, and this is the stage that we want to be at, so large changes would never be able to reach, since they are just moving around, and they would never be able to reach that minimum. And a small learning rate can be stuck here forever. If it just makes small changes, it can never get out of this valley. So it is highly important to tune a learning rate and make various experiments to see if we are diverging or if we are just stuck in some pit. So yeah, so that is why learning rate is an important parameter to keep an eye out for. Now, the environment that we use to train our NMT models. So generally we use an NVIDIA CUDA capable graphics card with at least 8 GB memory so that we can train a large batch size. So smaller batch sizes would generate poor models because it is not able to see a large variation of data at once. And then we use NVIDIA Docker to train on the cloud machines. The framework that we use for the open source implementations of transformer architectures can be found in the OpenNMT framework, and we are using the PyTorch version of it. There is also a TensorFlow version available, and both perform similarly, but just the implementation details of the framework are different. So once we have a trained model, we can do further optimizations with it. So one of them is quantization. So what quantization does is it reduces the precision for the model weights. For example, by default, our model weights are represented as 32-bit floating point numbers, so which take up 4 bytes. So at the cost of a slight dip in accuracy, we can convert those to 16-bit integers or even 8-bit integers, which straight away reduce the size by a factor of 2 or 4. So what this does is it reduces the latency at runtime, because the model now has to deal with smaller sized numbers. And it also reduces the size of the model. So it can be stored in RAM better, or even in cloud storage systems. Wherever it needs to be stored, it will take less memory. So the only con here is it will be a slight dip in accuracy. We must measure if that is acceptable to us. Usually it would be in the range of, let's say, a 0.5% to 1%. So that is something that we can do once the model is ready. So this is related to how we put this model in production once it has been trained. And then we can Dockerize this model. So Docker allows isolated environments for software to run. And each container, let's say, a container is a running instance of one software. So it can be horizontally scaled as and when, let's say, the load grows. You have one user, then one container is sufficient. But let's say the number of users grows, then you can automatically increase the number of containers to serve that load. So this is possible easily because all of our containers are stateless, and you can easily replicate them or remove them. So this is one consideration while deploying an NMT API. So the other feature that we will look at is masking. So if you remember that while augmenting our data, so we were masking some numbers, URLs, alphanumerics, which were not of translation importance to the model. So they could be kept as is, or in most cases, they would be transliterated. So while our model is in production, this comes in handy that we can automatically mask some regex patterns, for example, numbers, emails, URLs, and then we can replace them with placeholders. For example, here we have replaced it with #1 as the first entity, let's say. And this can also be specified by our users. The users can say that, okay, I want to mask simple technologies because otherwise it becomes Saral, Pradhyogiki or something like that. So we can mask it so that the model never sees it. So the model now has to translate this simple sentence. 1 was founded in 2, email us at 3. So for which the model gives us 1 की स्थापना 2 में की गई थी, हमें 3 पर email करें. And now that we have the translation, we can put those things back and treat them accordingly. For example, we want to transliterate this part. So we transliterate simple technologies. And we want to keep the number as is, or we could have converted this to Devanagari numerals. And we don't want to touch the email because it is a sensitive piece of information. We don't want it dirtied up by the model. This contact could have become Sampark, but we don't want the chance of that happening. So this feature allows us to preserve some entities. Then the next part that we look at is lookup tables. So certain phrases are really, really hard to translate if you do it literally, because they require world knowledge, real world knowledge. So just because language grows with the culture and there are no rules for it at all times. So for example, phrases like how do you do, aap kaise karte hain, should not be the translation because we know it from our real world knowledge. See you does not mean aapko dekhte hain because we know it from our real world knowledge. Similarly, idioms and phrases, there are countless examples for it. And so these can be maintained in lookup databases, where because it is easier to just look them up rather than expect the model to understand it. However, we are still working towards so that the model itself can understand these things, but that would require tremendous amounts of data. So there are other approaches that are currently being looked at. Then finally, we have another look at what are the challenges in the NMT realm. So the most important one is, let's say, word sense disambiguation, which we addressed in the very first slide. So for example, the word set in English has almost 90 senses, according to dictionary.com, across various parts of speech, verbs, nouns, and determining the correct gender to inflect the verbs and pronouns. So, for example, if we take names into account, so the model has to know that, okay, because of this name, I know that this is a male or a female or a neutral gender or something like that. So accordingly, the model has to behave. So this is an area of challenge for neural machine translation. And there are different forms of specifying respect, aap, tum, tu. So depending on the context, it would use different forms of these words, or it could be forced so that you always use the first term in, let's say, professional and legal communication. Then idiomatic translations, as we looked here, these idioms are very difficult to translate if we look at pure neural networks. Then co-reference resolution. For example, in a large sentence or a paragraph, you mention a noun first and then use the word it. So it could refer to any of the nouns that come before it. So which one is it? Is it co-reference? Is it resolution? Is it the boy? Is it the girl? Is it the dog? What is it? So depending on it, the verbs will behave differently, have different inflections. Then we come to dialects, domains, and local correctness. So the translation not only has to be correct, it has to sound natural, as used in that domain, let's say in banking or a legal judgment. So it has to sound like it is used in that space, that domain space. So that currently it requires different types of data, which is not feasible to maintain. So this is still an open challenge here. And the last part is that currently it needs a large amount of data to be able to train even a simple model. So which may not always be feasible, as it takes time and effort to create that data or even to find it out if it exists. So finally, we look at human touch points, like how does it then come back into the human world? So as we mentioned, CAT tools like Prabandhak, so where human translators use NMT, the NMT offers them suggestions to help them translate faster. And once they have made changes, these corrections go back, they are fed back into the adaptive system, which then corrects its behavior and then offers better suggestions along the way. So this is the end loop that we are looking at for a translation system. So that then concludes our session for today. So questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Vikrant. Let me see if I have any questions in the chat panel here. Any questions? Please put your questions in the Q&A panel, or you can also unmute. We can also unmute you and you can ask your question live. We'll be more than happy to do that. I think we can park the next 5 minutes for the Q&A from both Bhupen and Vikrant.
Sure. So should I stop presenting? Or?
Sure, Vikrant, you can.
Thanks.
Robin, can you unmute Shyam Kumar, please, so that he can ask his question live? Shyam Kumar.
Hello.
Yes, Shyam, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for organizing such a great session. Basically, my question was like for common sense questions, can knowledge bases help rather than like dictionary mapping or something?
Yeah, thanks, Sham, for asking. So, yes, of course, knowledge-based and systems would definitely help. I assume you mean knowledge graphs, maintaining knowledge graphs of different types of entities and their relationships to each other. So that would definitely help. So that would come in the realm of a transfer-based system. For example, you take the input sentence, you try to map it to your known knowledge for knowledge graph. Like this is the entity we are talking about. What is it doing? What are the other properties? So you now have a decent structure to it. Then you convert it to another language. So yes, knowledge bases can definitely help.
Robert,
Thank you.
Robert, can you please unmute Mahesh Kumar?
Hello?
Yes, Mahesh, we can hear you.
Yeah, so on the real time, we are replacing the masked entities, right? Some are transliterated, some are maintained as is. On an automatic pipeline or in a deployment pipeline, how can we judge this? Which has to be transliterated, which has to be maintained as is?
Yes, so great question, Mahesh. So we can keep for example, the regular expression patterns that we use for numbers, emails, URLs, or let's say alphanumeric things like coupon codes. So the fact that we know what these patterns are also tells us what to do with it. These things would largely be kept unchanged. Then let's say if we have complete words made out of only characters. So these are the things where we have to decide between translating them or keeping them unchanged. For example, some brands would want their the name to remain in English, let's say, or they would have some other case specific requirements, camel case or some other case. So this can be maintained as a dictionary, and other words we can keep a dictionary of known words, and then everything out of that is unknown. That can be transliterated. So that is how we can distinguish, at least to some extent. It cannot be done completely, but that is a start. So does that answer?
Yes, Vikram. Thank you.
Thanks, Manish.
Any other questions, please?
So one more question. How can you weight, like how important is this pre-processing when compared to model? Is model important or pre-processing much more important than the model?
So when we say versus the model, like as in the model just learning or different types of architectures?
Different types of architectures.
Okay. So different types of architectures would give you different results, but you won't be able to deterministically tell that, okay, will this be better in all cases? But when we look at the pre-processing step, this will affect no matter what kind of model you use, because it is in the initial stages of the pipeline. So it will affect everything downstream. So the earlier we take those steps, the better our chance of doing it great every step of the way is. So pre-processing, I would say, is incredibly important in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? And then we can close the session. Okay, I think then we can close the day's session. Really look forward to have all of you for our penultimate session next week, Wednesday, March 10th, which will further take us into the deep dive of AI for Bharat. Thank you, our coaches for the master classes for the day. Thank you, Vikrant, and thank you, Bhupen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, Swati, and thanks to all the attendees for taking the time out to join us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.